Hello, I'm Mike Babins. This is number 0709, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0709. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Steve Feinberg, a PhD who is the author of Do What Others Say Can't Be Done, Play the Metagame. What does it mean to play the metagame?
A metagame means a game of games. It's a game of patterns. So it's being able to see the hidden patterns that are going on in any behavioral transaction, in any behavioral interaction. So the large picture, but also to be able to see the deeper game that's being played. The first move in any metagame, the best move, I should say, is to always be stretching rather than shrinking.
Russell Brooks has just released his latest thriller novel. This one is called Jam Run. It's a story set in Jamaica that is based on a real-life tragic event.
The event was the savage murder of a young teenager. His name was Dwayne Jones. He attended a party dressed as a woman. He may have danced with a couple of guys, but no one knew that he was the woman. He made the fatal mistake of confiding in a girl that he knew from church. She outed him to her male friends. They confronted him in the parking lot. His body was found the next day. He had been shot, he had been stabbed, and he had been run over. Up until today, no arrests have been made.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back for his monthly visit, this time talking about body snatchers.
People were snatching bodies from graves to try to get a fresh corpse to deliver to an anatomist, and they would pay these body snatchers who were called resurrection men. This was happening largely in the 19th century. So they would take these fresh bodies that they would dig up. They'd find out when people were getting buried. They'd go dig it up at night, deliver it to an anatomist, and they'd get paid. These anatomists would have a fresh corpse to either study on their own or to have in a lecture with their students, and they could explore the body and, they could learn.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0709, was Mike Babins, the owner of Evergreen Cannabis Society in Vancouver, and a former co-worker with me on the radio many, many years ago. Thank you very much, Mike, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Speaking of cannabis dispensaries, owners of Castaway, a strip club in Whately, Massachusetts, are looking for a way to stand out in a saturated market. So they've decided to transition their business into a topless cannabis dispensary. Said co-owner Nick Spagnola, "We do have some experience on the cannabis side and some on the nudity side. We want to replace this nightclub scene and alcohol with something that is harmless in comparison." Club Castaway shut down during the pandemic and has not yet reopened. Details and licenses for its new incarnation are still being worked out. Well, I'm just curious as to what they're going to call the new establishment. You know I like alliteration. So how about Tokes and Tatas? And when a member of law enforcement makes the quote of, "I'm a captain of a police department, turn your camera off," I'm guessing that your first thought would be a well-placed official at a press conference scolding members of the media. But in this case, you'd be wrong. This was an Oklahoma top cop trying to wriggle out of a DUI arrest after being pulled over while driving home from a poker game as he pleaded with the cop to turn off his body cam. Here's just a 30-second portion of a much, much, much longer video.
Will you please talk to me?
I'll talk to you once we're done.
You can turn it off, you can turn it on.
I can turn it off once I'm done with my investigation, sir.
Okay. I'm asking you. I'm a captain on this police department.
I understand that, sir.
I get
I am
that.
a sergeant on this police officer, and
I
I've
am
taken
not-
an oath to uphold the law.
I
don't
not-
show favoritism to anyone, regardless. I don't care if you're a gangbanger or the President of the United States.
Sir, I'm not asking you for that.
If I was to treat you differently than I was to treat like some Southside loco or some pedo, how's that look on me?
Okay, I'm not asking you for that.
Because I wouldn't do that for any of them.
You can hear arresting officer Christopher Skinner hold firm as he reminds 55-year-old Captain James French that he has taken an oath to uphold the law. The video goes on to include the full sobriety test and arrest of French in slurred speech as he tries to explain he actually works for the force in its investigation bureau. The captain has been placed on administrative leave, having been employed by the department for 32 years. This is a moment to remember the brilliant words of that wise sage, Alan Funt.
Don't be surprised if someone steps up to you and says,
"Smile, you're on candid camera."
A stolen Amazon van was involved in a Milwaukee police chase. The chase started at around 1:35 p.m. A 32-year-old man demanded the keys to the van from a delivery driver, got in, and drove off. Officers later spotted the van more than 3 miles away and tried to pull it over, but the man refused. The chase ended when the man stopped in a gas station parking lot where he was arrested. I can just imagine how antsy some Amazon Prime customers must have been while they were tracking their deliveries on their device.
Learn all the ways to save with Amazon.
Meanwhile, I'm sure the perp has just realized that Prime doesn't pay. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, if you saw the phrase cocaine cat trending recently, here's why. A wild cat that was captured in Cincinnati tested positive for exposure to cocaine. In events only recently made public, a big cat named Amiri escaped from his owner's car during a police stop in January. Soon after, local dog wardens started getting calls about a possible leopard stuck in a tree. Responders retrieved Amiri, brought him to a shelter, and called in an expert. The expert suspected Amiri was actually a serval, a long-legged, big-eared wild cat that is native to sub-Saharan Africa and illegal to own in Ohio. A DNA test confirmed that hunch and also found narcotics in the cat's system. You see, after an incident last year involving a monkey on amphetamines, the shelter now tests all exotic animals that come through its doors. Anyway, Amiri is currently living at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. He suffered a broken leg during his ordeal, but is recovering well, said lead trainer Linda Castaneda. Amiri is young and very curious. He is exploring his new space and eating well. No charges have been yet filed against Amiri's former owner, but the case remains open. Okay, you already know how I feel about cats. They're evil, little pieces of evil plotting against mankind. But a wild cat on cocaine? Wow. To me, that's like watching Scarface.
Do you want to play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend.
Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Executive coach and neurostrategist Stephen Feinberg is a PhD who has learned a lot about the world as he watched his father's 24/7 gambling lifestyle, including losing the equivalent of $90,000 on a single football game. Dr. Feinberg is the author of Do What Others Say Can't Be Done, Play the Metagame. He learned the 3 steps about winning more from life by utilizing the bookie vantage point. Stephen is also a top 1% executive consultant who taught for nearly 30 years at the University of San Francisco School of Management. And his book features interviews that he conducted with 50 world-class leaders and entrepreneurs. He joins us via Zoom from California. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Peter. Pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for being on the program with us. I want to start with your book title and, to be more specific, the latter part of it. You say, play the metagame. Is that just a modern way of saying, see the big picture?
Well, it's certainly included in that. A metagame means a game of games, right? It's a game of patterns. So it's being able to see the hidden patterns that are going on in any behavioral transaction, in any behavioral interaction, so the large picture, but also to be able to see the deeper game that's being played. The first move in any metagame, the best move, if I should say, is to always be stretching rather than shrinking.
When you sat down to write this book, who exactly did you see this book being for?
Well, I started out asking a question: what's the number one foe of leaders? And so I was curious about how leaders, entrepreneurs, people who are running things are, what's their challenge? What's their foe, either interactionally or what they saw it in terms of the strategically? What is it that they're up against that they see as the foe over their careers?
Nowadays, we see a lot of, for lack of a better term, internet influencers. And I'm just wondering if, in your estimation, the people who are considered influencers today, would that be a modern new take on entrepreneurs?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Those folks are, they're dancing as fast as they can. They're trying to figure out ways to impact. I mean, there's good and bad in all those kinds of things. And what I see is that the people who are able to do what others say can't be done are doing three things. So if they're doing these three things, then there's entrepreneurs. That they're a different crowd. The way they approach things, the way they, some people just want to make a fast buck, and some people actually, that notion of actually influence to advance civilization, to do some good stuff in the world. I tend to lean towards the people who are interested or want to do good in the world.
The people you are trying to reach, the people who you say are at the top of their game, are these people who take a lot of stock in the potential risks, or do they ignore risk?
Well, they definitely do not ignore risks. So what we know about people who are first adapters. So let me tell you what these first adapters do. They do three things. They're able to see options on a game board that others don't. They defy expectations. They're able to change the pattern. And the third thing is they're able to persuade others to do the exceptional. So they're focused on these three things, these three pattern sorting. So our brain tends to sort through patterns. Our brain is a pattern engine. And so we always notice patterns, interactional patterns, economic patterns. We see these various patterns in our life. And what great leaders, what great entrepreneurs do are doing a pattern sorting, and then they resort the patterns to come up with something new.
I alluded to the fact in the introduction that you were the son of a bookie. I'm just wondering if you feel entrepreneurship is in itself a gamble.
Sure. If there's risk, there's some form of gamble. Our brain is always trying to predict something. So since we're always trying to predict something, we're making a bet. Our brains are, in fact, a bet. Now, it may not be money, it may be meaning. So it's always or expectations that we have about what's going to happen. We're trying to predict what will happen all the time. So the way, as you mentioned earlier, is that my dad didn't want me to go into the family business because he was a big time bookie in New York City. And in one game, he lost 10, at that time was 10 large. That's $10,000 in bookie parlance, $95,000 today. So it was a great deal of, it was a roller coaster. And the next day, by the end of the day, he actually won money. So it was an amazing situation, which was a roller coaster. And the intensity is still affecting my brain, my nervous system. And learning how to deal with that, it was a masterclass in handling and mishandling uncertainty.
So besides the intensity that you just described, what types of things do you apply every day, and you've applied in your book, that are things that you basically learned at the knee of your father?
Well, there were those three things were basically is spot the game, being able to see what is the game that's being played. Most people, I've asked executives and clients in various levels, do you know what the game is that's being played here? Do you know what the objective is? Do you know what people really want, what your boss wants or your colleagues want? And typically what happens is they tell me one thing, and then I go to their colleagues or their boss, and I said, what is it that you're after? And it's usually quite different. It's not the same thing. It sounds similar, but it's not the same thing. So most of the time, people don't realize the real game board and what's really expected and what they're really after. So the first thing is, what is the game? Game spotting. The second thing is, so there are patterns. What are the patterns that are being played? Like, a pattern could be don't rock the boat. A pattern could be hurry up or slow down or you're not good enough. There are these patterns that go on. And what you want to do, whatever walk of life, whether or not you're a leader or a person who's in a different position, role, is to break those patterns if they're not getting you the desired outcome. So spot the game, bust the pattern. And the third thing is to frame the future, or set the frame of what you're going to influence other people, because that's what my dad did over and over again. He spotted the game, he broke the pattern. If something wasn't working, he figured out, he quickly changed what he was doing, because he wasn't just a bookie. He had other enterprises and he had other businesses, restaurants and other trucking businesses and other kinds of things. And you could always, he was a guy who knew what to say, when to say it in order to get someone to do something. Usually that was me.
There are people out there in business who claim to be, as they say, laser focused. They focus on something, they drill down until they hit bedrock, and they're not, and in a way they're kind of working with blinders on. Are you saying that this is something that should not be done, that there is a detriment to working this way?
No, not at all. In fact, the foreword to my book was written by a space shuttle astronaut, two-time space shuttle astronaut on the space shuttle Endeavour to the International Space Station. And one of the things that he talked about was his ability to focus, right? He trained and he retrained and he trained again, but that capacity to focus, to really know what you're doing and engage is a big deal. So it's just, you want to have both the capacity to focus, but then if you're locked in, stuck on a pattern, if it's not working, then you want to be able to adapt. That's what a first adapter is. They see the game and they can adapt to it and then focus in on it. So it's that people get into a mechanical way of doing stuff. Habit, if you will, patterns or habits, routines, and you want to be able to change those habits or routines if they're not working. If they are working, stick with it. That's what, it's important to be able to do it. But if you're in a really tough situation, you have to be able to adapt as fast as you can.
When we look,
what we face today, all this uncertainty and change, you have to be able to adapt. But then once once you've read the game board right, focus and deliver and make it happen.
Well, you talk about the uncertainty of today. That's what I was going to lead to. And that is, we see what's happening in government, various levels of government, governments around the world, companies around the world. We see where the situation is going today with economies. Do you think that in a lot of these cases, it's just a simple situation of people not following the key issues that you espouse in your book?
Well, it's interesting that during these unprecedented times, uncertain times, bad leadership really makes things worse. It's not have all this uncertainty, but it's interesting that bad leaders really make things worse. And we've all experienced the consequences of poor leadership. But what's intriguing is that good leaders raise their game to handle uncertainty. And they are these first adapters that I talk about in my book. And again, they do these three things differently. They see options on the game board others don't. They defy expectations. They change the patterns, and they persuade others to create the exceptional.
Stephen, it's a fascinating topic. Again, your book is Do What Others Say Can't Be Done, Play the Metagame. I thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
My pleasure, and I hope it helps people as they're looking through the book.
Stephen Feinberg, author of Do What Others Say Can't Be Done, Play the Metagame. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0709, and you'll find the links to Stephen's site where you can download a free chapter of his book, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram. Available on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just about every other way you stream audio. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's everywhere you want to be. In some places you don't.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Russell Brooks, the author of the new thriller Jam Run. Also, Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com is here to talk about body snatchers. But we have a lot more in Stuff File news right here, right now. For decades, pro wrestlers were highly insulted that their sport was thought to be fake, so much so that they might body slam a reporter who dared to suggest such a thing. Obviously, the athleticism is real, but it is in fact fake in the sense that it's scripted. The winners are known in advance, and theater is the predominant factor of the entertainment value. Despite this, World Wrestling Entertainment, the company behind the exhibitions and competitions, says it has begun talks with regulators in Michigan and Colorado asking them to allow betting on matches. WWE says they'd work with the accounting firm of Ernst & Young, which tabulates votes for the Emmy Awards, and would help to keep the winners secret, just like the Emmy winners' names. So far, Colorado is not currently considering plans to allow such betting, and Michigan regulators deny they have been in talks with WWE. Well, the secrecy is working so far, and you know WWE would never lie to us. Still, this is quite the cockamamie idea. It would be like betting parlors taking bets on how a movie ends. And going back to the middle of the story where they come up with the idea that it's like the Emmy Awards and that Ernst & Young, which tabulates votes for the Emmy Awards, would keep the winners secret. Well, the thing about the Emmys is the winners don't know that they're winners until the envelope is opened. Wrestlers do know who the winner is. So it's problematic. Anyway, I don't understand that story, but let's move along, shall we? Jordan Harris was looking over his car, which had recently been in the shop. He found a passenger inside, a dead passenger, and not only dead, but already cremated and stuck in an urn. The mechanic had no explanation, but a funeral home helped identify the crematorium it came from, and then law enforcement informed him that the urn was owned by the victim of a house fire in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where Harris also lives. That reminded Harris that a neighbor that he did not know did have a house fire, and sure enough, his mystery passenger turned out to be that woman's late husband. Still mysterious, however, is how the dead man got into his car. The wife does not know. Wow. A guy in a house fire getting cremated. Talk about getting burned twice. I guess he just wanted to go on one last road trip. After all, he earned it. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, pop quiz. If you crashed your car into a building, what would you immediately do? Maybe call emergency services? See if anyone was hurt? We're betting you wouldn't answer with, "Get a manicure next door to the place I just destroyed." But that's what an Ontario woman did on March the 3rd. The woman was driving a Jeep that plowed into the storefront of Guilty Pleasure's Dessert Cafe, shattering windows and destroying merchandise. Thankfully, the bakery, owned by siblings Tanvir and Simran Bawa, was not yet open for the day and no one was inside. Tanvir rushed to the scene after getting a frantic call from the pair's mother, while his sister got the news from a worker at KC Nails and Beauty Shop, the nail salon next door to Guilty Pleasures. The employee told Simran that the driver was inside KC's getting her nails done. Tanvir spoke to the driver. I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's just giggling. She's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." His sister added, "I'm telling you, this whole time, not one single apology from her." This is pretty much my bread and butter. Simran said the bakery had sustained serious structural damage, but that their insurance provider was requiring the shop to stay open for the time being, despite the shattered glass and a front door that doesn't fully open. I'm just curious to find out how much of a tip the driver is leaving for getting her nails done. Because it should be big. Really big. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Author Russell Brooks is releasing his 5th thriller novel. It's set in Jamaica, and it's inspired by a true event. It's called Jam Run. Russell joins us via Zoom from right here in Montreal. Hi, Russell.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's inspired by a true event. What's the true event, and what brought the attention of it to you as a writer?
Well, the event was the savage murder of a young teenager. His name was Dwayne Jones. And what happened was that in the Irwin area of Montego Bay, he attended a party. It was reported that there were over 300 people there, and he attended dressed as a woman. And apparently, from the reports, he may have danced with a couple of guys, but no one knew that he was a woman. And then he made the fatal mistake of confiding in a girl that he knew from church, and she outed him to her male friends. They confronted him in the parking lot, and then there was a brawl, and he tried to escape, but he didn't succeed in escaping, and unfortunately, his body was found the next day. He had been shot, he had been stabbed, and he had been run over with a vehicle. And up until today, no arrests have been made. So the inspiration came from that. I was actually finishing up the Demeter Code, my previous novel, when I read about the event on the news, and it was so shocking that it stuck in my head for several days. And eventually an idea came. I said, well, if I were to write a story about this, it wouldn't be a spy novel, which is what I normally write, but it then occurred to me that perhaps this could be a sequel to Chill Run, which was an Eddie Barrow mystery. And I felt that what if he were in Jamaica and he witnessed that murder? What would he do? would he just go along with his life, or would he try and solve the murder himself? And what ended up happening is that he is kind of roped into investigating the case when the victim's sister shows up at his book signing the next day and tells him that her brother was originally supposed to come. And that's when he realized that it was very difficult for him to say no, and that's how everything started.
When exactly did this heinous crime take place?
It took place in 2013, July of 2013.
And in deciding to put it into the structure of one of your major characters from previous books, did you actually do any research, physical research, going to Jamaica to flesh out the story?
Yes, I went to Jamaica eventually, but in the beginning I couldn't go to Jamaica because when I was ready to go, COVID hit, so there was a travel ban. So I did my research online. I read several articles, and I made friends with the CEO of a tourism company called Real Tours Jamaica, and his name is Norris Douglas, and he fact-checked everything that was Jamaican about my story. Like the story was already written. The first draft was already complete. So when I contacted him, he helped to fact-check everything from every neighborhood where the story takes place, to the Jamaican patois, to the food, to everything that was Jamaican. That was a big help. It was only January of this year that I finally decided, look, I need to go. I needed some time off. I needed to get away from Canada for a bit. It was cold, so I chose to go to Jamaica. I spent 2 weeks there, and I met Norris, and he showed me around, and he showed me every location that takes place in my book. Well, almost every location that takes place in my book. And I was able to get a firsthand experience of the feel of each neighborhood, the atmosphere, the environment, and I was able to incorporate my personal experiences into the story when I wrote the latest draft.
Full disclosure, I know your parents. You know my family. They're both West Indians from a different island, but both West Indians. And you know the West Indian background can be somewhat patriarchal, and also in discussing some of the things that your book delves into, it's not something that is openly discussed, shall we say. So
exactly.
That being said, was there any trepidation in your part in writing a book like this, and in uncovering a story like this, and to displaying the wounds that might be underlying in a particular culture?
Well, to answer simply, no, I did not have any trepidation. I decided to take the bull by the horns and delve right into the subject matter because it's real, it's going on, and we cannot avoid discussing these matters. So I did my research, and I even consulted with an attorney who is in Jamaica. She's the assistant director of prosecutions to help fact check the legal matter, the legal content of the story. And I consulted with the former director general of JFLAG back in 2016 when I started to gather some, when I was taking notes. So I was not afraid to tackle this subject matter, and I even tackled other subject matter that is not normally discussed, but I tackled it because, in my opinion, stories like this need to be told.
As I mentioned, this is your fifth edge of your seat type thriller. Is this the one that, shall we say, is the deepest that you've gone in writing a story, not just necessarily to entertain, but also to educate in a certain way?
Well, I would say yes. This is my boldest project to date. I deal with subject matter that is very sensitive and it would be very sensitive, I'm sure, to many readers. And the fact is that I even consulted with a psychologist. You probably know her, Dr. Myrna Lashley.
Yes.
And she's a good friend of mine. And I consulted with her basically to revise certain sections, because I want to write a story that's not only entertaining, but it's also important to write the story in a way that it will not risk offending any reader. So I had to choose my words and my sentences and my paragraphs very carefully when I was writing. And also keep in mind that, not everyone is going to be sensitized to the subject matter. So it was really important to work with the right people to make sure that I can tell a story that is, well, how could I say, make it the best that it can be.
Now that you've written this book, and again, it is a bit of a departure from what you've written in the past, do you think this experience changes your writing going forward?
Oh, for sure. I will be writing, I will be going back to the same subject matter that I've done before, but this experience has really opened my eyes. I've learned so many new things that I did not know before. And this will be knowledge that I will keep and use in the future when I'm writing my next novel and future novels.
Does it make you a much more brave writer?
Well, I would say, does it make me more brave? I don't think it makes me more brave. It's the first time I've actually written this type of subject matter. But I would say, yes, it was my first bold step. Maybe, yes, I was a little bit brave, but I mean, I don't think, me personally, this is subject matter that I've spoken about before, let's say among friends or among family, well, mostly among friends, I would say, and in discussion groups, like with acquaintances. But putting it into a book is the first time. So yes, I was already prepared to write this type of story.
Now, you have a launch that's coming up at the end of the month. I believe it's on the 31st, and it's there to honor a particular day. Tell us about that.
Yes, this ties in with the International Transgender Day of Visibility. And the reason why I chose this date for the launch is because this day ties in with some of the subject matter of the story itself. So it does deal with LGBTQ youth and adults in the Caribbean. And I chose Jamaica because the location is where most of the events that inspired the story take place. So it was more realistic for me to just set the story in Jamaica itself because it would have been much more easier to research. And from the point of view of a reader who's reading this, they would say, okay, yes, this is realistic because it actually happened in real life. So the Dwayne Jones incident is not the only incident that inspired Jam Run. There are other events, but I don't want to talk about all of them because it would reveal spoilers for the story.
Again, the book is called Jam Run. Congratulations on creating your fifth, as I said, edge of your seat thriller. Russell, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
You're very welcome, Peter.
Russell Brooks, author of Jam Run. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0709, and you'll find the links to Russell's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Peter Anthony Holder, and I'm the host of a new weekly podcast called Business Beyond Bizarre. What exactly is Business Beyond Bizarre?
A podcast of the slightly unusual.
Yeah, like she said. To be more specific, it's a show that features folks who have slightly quirky hobbies or businesses. It's a chance to meet some people who think outside the box and, metaphorically speaking, are off the beaten path. You'll meet folks like the creators of the fart spray called Liquid Ass, the woman who invented goat yoga, father and son undertakers who have perfected how to save your tattoos after you die, the founder of the religion Jediism, plus why you should be drinking gin made from elephant dung.
Business beyond bizarre.
Oh, there's a lot more where these came from. Give us a listen. Who knows? This show might just spark you to find your own slightly bizarre path.
On the air, on stations in Singapore, New Zealand, and America, and streaming through your computer. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come in the program, we'll talk to Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com about body snatching. Plus, we do indeed have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, but I got a few more Stuff File news stories to share with you right here, right now. A man accused of walking down a street naked in Palm Beach, Florida, told police he's from a different Earth. Police arrested 44-year-old Jason Smith on charges of indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. The ordeal began when an employee from the eatery Taboo called police to say a naked man had just walked past the restaurant in view of a number of customers. When police arrived, bystanders quickly pointed out the man to officers. And honestly, does anybody really need to point out a naked man to officers? The one naked guy should be obvious to them. Anyway, Smith told police he didn't know where he had left his clothes. Police said he refused to give his name or date of birth. Officers took him in for questioning. After finally giving a name, the man told police he didn't have a social security number or an identification card. Smith told police he resided on a different Earth. He later told police he lived in West Palm Beach. Well, that could be considered a different Earth. And a 39-year-old Florida woman is facing a felony battery charge for allegedly striking her 68-year-old boyfriend in the eye with a thrown avocado.
Avocados from Mexico.
Police say that Carlene Biswanger and the victim had been living together in a St. Petersburg apartment for about a year. During a confrontation, police allege Biswanger threw an avocado at the victim's face, causing injury to his right eye.
Holy guacamole.
Biswanger also allegedly threw a hanging rod that struck the man in the arm. A portion of this incident was witnessed by a neighbor. The alleged battery occurred at an apartment complex for residents aged 62 and older. After being read her rights, Biswanger denied directly striking the victim. She was arrested for battering a victim aged 65 or older, which is a felony. Biswanger's rap sheet includes multiple convictions for illegal possession of Xanax, as well as convictions for theft, DUI, obstructing police, probation violation, and driving without a license. Because in all of these stories, they always drive without a license. I'd like to know how far she threw the avocado from, because I'm thinking the Florida Marlins could use her, especially if she's left-handed.
Call for Marlins season tickets. Be here when it happens.
Anyway, let's get to our last guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with a story for the month of March. And this one deals with body snatching. Marc joins us via Skype from New York. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks once again for being on the program with us. You know, since we were talking about body snatching, I've often had this query, this question. What's the line between body snatching and archaeology?
Well, I would say medicine.
I would say time. I just don't know how much time.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. But yeah, I mean, just to go back to my answer there, medicine. People were snatching bodies from graves. You try to get a fresh corpse to deliver to an anatomist, and they would pay these body snatchers who were called resurrection men. This was happening largely in the 19th century. So they would take these fresh bodies that they would dig up. They'd find out when people were getting buried. They'd go dig it up at night, deliver it to an anatomist, and they get paid. And it was a business. And then these anatomists would have a fresh corpse to either study on their own or to have a lecture with their students and teach their students with this fresh corpse. And they could explore the body and, they could learn, many obviously things that we know today is because there were body snatchers who got fresh corpses for anatomists to study and learn about the human body. So kind of as horrible as it sounds, some good certainly came from it. But body snatching has some obviously creepy stories behind it. Perhaps the most famous took place in Edinburgh in 1828. There were two body snatchers whose names were Burke and Hare, William Burke and William Hare. And actually, I shouldn't even really say they were body snatchers. I guess they kind of were. But what they did was they were a bit more innovative than the typical body snatcher who would dig up, the resurrection man who would dig up the grave. They thought, why go to all that trouble to dig up a grave for a relatively fresh corpse when we could just kill somebody and have a very fresh corpse, even fresher, and not have to do any digging up. Saves them a lot of time and effort.
So what you're saying is that they're not body snatchers, they're worse.
They were murderers.
Okay.
And so they murdered 16 people in Edinburgh in 1828, as I mentioned, and they delivered it to this anatomist, particular anatomist, who would pay them for these bodies until they were finally caught. Someone finally recognized the body, and realized who it was, and they caught these guys. And Burke's skin was actually turned into a wallet, which is on display in Edinburgh. So anyway, this was a thing that was going on. There were some people who were, who would go to certain lengths to have their bodies be protected from grave robbers or body snatchers. And there were some who weren't. And that kind of brings us to this month's story, which took place in March of 1859. And this particular body snatcher had gone into a graveyard not too far from Cincinnati. And he dug up a grave, and he put it in a sack, as one would. And on his way out of the graveyard, he was trying to climb a fence. It was a pretty high fence around the graveyard, and he realized this was going to be tough with this, literally dead weight behind him in this bag, with a string or a rope, whatever it was he was dragging it by. So I'm just going to read this bit from the short article that talks about this story, which, by the way, has a great headline: "Hung to a Corpse." So the article says, "It would seem that the man had placed the cord of the sack over his shoulders that he might climb the easier, the sack hanging at his back. At any rate, he was found in the morning dead, hanging by the neck on one side of the fence and the pendant corpse on the other." So basically, he dug up a corpse, and the corpse got its revenge by having this guy hung over a fence, who ended up dying as well. And clearly, he was found, I guess, by the authorities because it's in the newspapers. Which is a shame that another body snatcher couldn't have found this guy and had two fresh bodies, or one very fresh body and one, I'm sure relatively fresh body, and gotten double the pay for an easy night's work.
They must have been hanging there like human pendulums.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Now,
quite a scene.
You told us a little bit about anatomists, and what exactly were they? Anatomists?
The anatomists were, those who would study how the body worked. You cut open the body, dissect it, understand how the organs worked, and learn about the human anatomy. So that was their job.
I fail to understand why back in the 1800s or even in the early 1900s that they would need to steal bodies or grave rob, because let's be honest, the laws or kill people for that matter, because let's be honest, the laws pertaining to proper burial and taking care of the situation of the family were a lot different then than they are now. And I'm sure there were a lot of, for lack of better term, what they used to call hobos or homeless people or the disenfranchised who would die without anybody thinking anything of them. I would think there was a plethora of bodies available to not have to rob a grave.
Well, I should add that aside from the bodies that they would dig up, anatomists would often get bodies of executed criminals. So, back in those days, hangings were very popular. Criminal would be tried and hanged in public, and people would go and watch, and they bring the family. This was a whole other event, a whole other story as well. But those bodies would often be then given to the anatomist. It was almost like an additional punishment. Like, not only are we going to hang you and end your life, but then we're going to give it to these guys to cut you open and study your insides. It's almost like, an added punishment after the fact. So they would get those bodies, but generally speaking, that wasn't enough, especially with the courses they were teaching, the students who had to learn and practice. So they need more bodies. I don't know about the hobos. I mean, I imagine if they could get those, they got those as well. But I guess you need to have someone who's finding them in a timely manner, whereas digging up a grave, you would see when funerals were planned and you could know, someone's just died. There might be a, mention of it locally. They could go to the graveyard, see the burials happening, and then go back at night, and then they knew exactly where to go. So it probably made it a little bit easier in that sense than trying to track down someone who you're hoping is about to die, like the hobos you were talking about.
Now, would the grave robbers be, for lack of a better term, neat about it? And by that I mean, you dig up a body, you take the body, do you put the dirt back in the plot? In other words, I'm just wondering if around the United States and Canada and in the UK, if there are gravestones for plots that nobody knows are actually empty.
Yeah, I think oftentimes they were neat about it. They try to replace the dirt and cover their tracks because they'd want to go back for other bodies.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, you gotta do the job cleanly and efficiently, and there'd be more business.
So I guess the moral of this story is, and by the way, just for the sake of argument here, I have already paid for my funeral. I paid for my funeral 25 years ago. I'm literally on the layaway plan. It's all done. And one of the things that I will not be having is I will not be having a public funeral of any kind, and I will not be having anything in the newspaper. So I'm guessing the moral of this story is well, I'm being cremated anyway, so it's a moot point, but don't put an obit in the paper. I think that's the moral of this story. Am I wrong?
Well, especially back then.
I mean, am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we don't have to dig up bodies for these reasons anymore. I think we've got other ways of handling our anatomy, which is good news. We've learned a lot, and certainly there's technology to help with all these things as well in terms of education. So, yeah, things have gotten better, much better.
You say things have gotten better. Can you quantify in any way, shape, or form a time frame as to when things actually got better? In other words, what was the heyday of grave robbers, and when did they, for lack of a better term, die out?
I think it was mostly like early 19th century to mid to late 19th century, I would say.
Oh, so
just about up to the turn of the century.
Just about to the turn.
Yeah, I think it calmed down around then. I think some anatomy acts were put in place, and I think certain laws were put in place that kind of helped prevent it from happening.
So getting back to the story of the guys you first mentioned, the two who were killing people,
Burke and Hare.
Yeah, were they caught?
Yeah, they were caught. Yeah, after the 16th one, someone recognized one of the bodies that they were using in the anatomy school, and that led to them finally being captured. And one of them was hanged. One of them, I think it was Hare turned King's evidence on his partner Burke, and he was exiled. And the other, and I think he just kind of, I forgot what exactly happened to him, but things did not go well for him. And like I said, Burke was turned into a pocketbook. His skin was literally turned into a pocketbook, which is on display. But yeah, he was put to death.
Another fun story, Mark. I can't wait to see what you're going to have for us for April.
Always delightful, weird news.
Thank you very much for being on the program with us once again, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com. He's also the author of several books, his most recent one being Chasing Ghosts, a tour of our fascination with spirits and the supernatural. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0709, and you'll find links to Mark's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Well, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Police arrested a man suspected of robbing an Ohio grocery store after his alleged getaway car was trapped at a car wash. According to police, the manager of a Giant Eagle grocery store spotted a man leaving with a shopping cart full of $498.41 in unpaid merchandise in South Euclid, Ohio. She reported the incident to store security, who saw the suspect attempt to get into a potential getaway car. However, officials say the driver of the possible getaway car had gone to a nearby car wash while the suspect was in Giant Eagle. The car was trapped between several others and couldn't move. Police arrested the suspect, who had an outstanding warrant, and charged him with theft. They also arrested the driver of the possible getaway car, who also had an outstanding warrant. Now, I gotta ask, when committing a crime that requires a getaway vehicle, is it really necessary to have a clean car? Because why? Oh, why? If you're planning to steal about $500 worth of groceries, would you think that it's a good idea to get into a car wash line during your crime spree? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0709. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0709. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter as PA Holder, and don't forget to check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, MediaCore in Singapore, WLSLLP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Always remember that an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And with a bushel of apples, you could have a hell of a time with the doctor's spouse.